Welcome to the North Fork Experience, the podcast where we explore the journeys of exceptional individuals and businesses shaping our communities and industries. I'm your host, Kirk Hays, and today we have a highly analytical real estate investor and realtor who brings a powerful background in military discipline, business law, and data analytics. Please welcome Kevin Murphy.
Thank you very much, Kirk. Appreciate you having me on.
Kevin, it's fantastic to have you. Let's dive right into your North Fork experience here. Kevin, you served in the United States Marine Corps and deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. How did that discipline, strategic planning, and focus on mission accomplishment you learned in the military prepare you for the high-stakes environment of real estate investment?
I think so. Going back, it was post 9/11. I joined in March of 2002. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I joined really ready to go. I was ready to leave, ready to go overseas, and I mean, it's better to, as they say in the Marines, better to sweat in peace than bleed in war. And the training was very intense at that point. I mean, it's intense anyway because it's the Marine Corps, but it was definitely with the idea that we're sending you out there to come back alive. And that kind of intensity, when you transfer it over to the civilian side, it's it's do whatever you have to do to accomplish the mission, make sure that you get things done. And then, when you come into the real estate side of things, it's, whether it's you're doing the investment yourself or you're doing it for a client, it's that the priority is that you have to make the numbers work at all costs, obviously ethically, but make sure that you go the extra mile and you satisfy the client, or you make sure that you hit your goals.
Yeah, I can certainly see the carryover there. While the stakes obviously aren't nearly as high, it's so important still that you have that push towards the ultimate goal there that you're aiming for, whether you're a real estate investor or in the Marines there. It's just so critical to be able to put in the work that, to see that process through, whether it's, as you said, in the Marines or investing in real estate there. So it's I think that's really what it comes down to, is just that ability to put in the work towards that goal.
Yeah, failure is not an option.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you were inspired to move to Arizona and begin investing after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What was the biggest mindset shift that the book triggered, and how did you identify opportunity in a state still rebounding from the 2008 Great Recession?
Yeah, I think so. Rich Dad Poor Dad was a great book, and it started me on the path. It was a game changer in the way that I thought about money. Cash Flow Quadrant was his second book, which I quickly picked up as soon as I finished Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was like, I need more. And so Cash Flow Quadrant was I would say it was better for me because it drilled down more. It was more analytical on how you think about the money. But to go back to the Rich Dad Poor Dad, which kind of opened that door, it really compared, the two fathers, his friend's father who was making money, through passive income streams, and his father who was breaking his back to make ends meet. Everyone's got the 24 hours in a day. And it's like how if you divvy those up into 1 hour coins, as I like to, make the analogy, how are you going to spend your 24 today? So like you'll spend 8 in a bed, just doing rest and recovery, and that's got its own value, that's important. But, how are you going to spend the rest of those, whether it's, 16, 18, whatever, how many remaining hours that you're not sleeping. And so in that book, it basically said, this father, this friend's father, because of passive income, was able to spend more time with his son, more time with his family, doing things that were more enjoyable for him. And I had never looked at, money like that. My father was a cop, a very good worker, very hard worker. I learned a lot about having a strong work ethic from him. And, he had some investments with passive income sort of on the side, real estate wise, but he was more of a, you exchange your coins for a paycheck. And so after reading that book, I knew that he had worked hard and that there was value there, but I wanted to take a different path. I wanted to try and make my money work for me and, accomplish that, freedom that you have when things kind of are going, when you have the wind at your back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you too, and I've read that book also a while ago, and it triggered that same sort of thing in me too. So, we talked a little bit before. I was an engineer in the oil and gas industry where 100-hour work weeks are the norm. And,
Yeah.
now that I have a couple kids, and, that's just, I can, like you said, there's a lot of value in that good hard work, and there was a lot of money in that industry, but that's just not how I want to live my life at this point, so we're, in my personal life too. And that book kind of started it, but yeah, working on making some changes there to be around more for my kids and stuff like that instead of flying all over the country chasing oil. So,
Yeah, I think at some point everyone learns that lesson, whether they read the book or not. They
uh-huh.
learn that, like, when you're in your 20s, your early 20s, which is when I read my book. I read that book. I was like, oh, this is great, but it was hard to make that like, it was like, yeah, I want to make that transition. That seems great, but you're still like, you're running 100 miles an hour, because you're young and you've got that energy. At some point, your 40s, your 50s,
Yeah, yep.
you're like, be nice to pack it in and have something that's paying a dividend check every month or a quarterly, disbursement or whatever. So you learn the lesson at some point in your life.
Yeah. Once again, you make a great point because I did the oil field stuff from like 22 to 33 there, and
Yeah,
it's not so bad then. You don't have a wife or kids holding you down, and it's just easy to go, and you got all that energy, and yeah, it
yeah,
catches up with you though when you do that work for that long. So yeah.
yeah, 100%.
So you hold a BA in business law and certification in applied data analytics. How does this specialized analytical background help you identify undervalued projects and maximize tax benefits for your clients?
Yeah, I would say that even my getting into, like, leaving New York and getting into the Arizona market was, I think that's just my personality. I went to school, if you ever Google, GI Bill memes, it's like, you've got the old guy in the class, and
Yeah.
there's surrounded by, like, people half his age. So I went to ASU when I was out in Arizona. I was in my 30s when I went to college. So I was significantly older, but even before then, just like how my brain works, I went to Arizona. It was one of the 5 worst hit states after the Great Recession. And so my grandparents were out there. I had a high school friend out there. And so it was, a logical step for me. And I was waitering at the time. I wanted to do something. I wanted to get into real estate. Coming from New York, it's very capital intensive. When I was going out to Arizona, my first property I bought for, which sounds like a joke now, but I bought it in Central Phoenix for $132 to $3,000 credit.
Uh-huh.
It was cheaper than the sticks to put it up. Like, it was
Yeah, yep.
the low replacement costs. And so coming into Arizona, okay, you've got one of the worst 5 hit worst states. They hadn't rebounded for sure. Like, they were just
Uh-huh.
starting to come up around 2011. I got up there in January of 2014. It was a slow grind higher. Yeah, a lot of institutions coming in and buying, like, sheets of distressed assets, but then, they quickly made a couple, 10% or whatever, and they just sold back. So it sort of went through like a double dip. And I got out there, like I said, I bought my first property for, the low hundreds, which I still own today. And it was a 2-family. I kept buying after that, and then I started getting into the flipping world, and partnered with a good friend of mine that I'm still partnered with on other ventures, and we really crushed it. It was a really good time to be out there, but you have to know the market, and I learned that lesson the hard way. I got too big for my britches, and I was, oh, everything I touch turns to gold, and so.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I learned very quickly that that's not how it goes. But it's every failure is a great opportunity for a lesson learned. So.
Yeah, and that's how you have to take it. Those failures are really important. I mean, they're almost as important as your wins at some point, because you see what not to do, and that's so critical. And but the important thing is to be able to learn from them, and I'm sure that's a value that you guys took from the Marines as well. That a failure, it's the stakes are a little higher again in that. So when failure happens, you really have to analyze it and grow from it quickly. And
Quickly, yeah,
and
very quick.
that's so important in this business as well. So,
Yeah, yeah. You can't let your ego get in your way.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you take the attitude of someone that has some experience, but still a beginner's mindset when you're trying to learn and experience some new things there and learn from those setbacks.
Yeah, 100%.
So your investment focus has spanned multifamily, single family, and now includes the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. What is the key metric or indicator you watch closely when evaluating a new market for expansion?
Yeah, great question. I First of all, people are there because there's someone that's going to pay them to be there. So if the area is not expanding with commercial real estate, you have to watch that. You have to watch for employers getting in the area. Typically, you'll see residential go up before commercial. Like, commercial properties usually lag residential. If you think of an example, if you take like a city like, let's say Chicago will, people that are lower on the income spectrum, whatever, they'll have to go further because obviously the closer to your job is more expensive. That's going to get
Yep.
the highest payers. And so you have to go further out. Once that starts grouping together, then you'll start seeing development for commercial go out there. And maybe they'll have like a satellite there, or maybe there'll be other employers that are out there. And so that's sort of how the cycle runs. And yeah, you have to look for employers. So I'll give you an example. When I learned about the Taiwan semi plant coming to North Phoenix, I was like overwhelmed with joy because you're
Yep.
talking the biggest data center, chip fab factory that's coming to the United States. I think it's I forget how many million square feet it is. It's huge though. And every time that I'm in that area, I go up just to see like how progress is going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's going to bring a lot of high paying jobs, and those high paying jobs will then, there's that ripple effect. You start building the economy off of those high paying jobs. People with that are making $200,000 a year have a lot of disposable income if they're single, and they'll go out to the bars, they'll go out to the restaurants, they'll buy clothes, they'll buy cars, they'll buy new couches, and so like that. Ironically, the same thing that led to the demise of Arizona, because everything was
Yeah.
so levered to real estate in 2004 through 6 or whatever. And so once you lost real estate, everything shut down. So it's the opposite, and it's in reverse when you do it the other way. You start bringing a lot of high paying jobs to the area, you have those collateral effects into the economy. So yeah, when I'm like right now, I'm looking at the Midwest. There's certainly already been a lot of interest in the Midwest. Detroit's exploded. Milwaukee has blown up. It's, that's where the affordable housing hub is. The more onshoring of manufacturing jobs that we get, which is this administration's, target, is to bring jobs back to America. Do you want to build when material costs and labor costs are so high? Do you want to build in the South or the Southwest, or do you want to go to these factories that have been sitting dormant and just turn the lights back on and fresh coat of paint, like make sure everything's up to code and use these existing plants? And so that's what the Midwest is benefiting from, and will continue to benefit. So yeah, you want to make sure that the jobs are there. That would probably be the biggest component. People don't stay where there aren't jobs. We saw that when Detroit started losing jobs and car manufacturing went overseas. Those towns just, they didn't really, they couldn't sustain it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we see that a lot in oil and gas too. Going back to my experience there, it's such a boom and bust thing that you see some of those towns kind of pop up overnight, and then the prices bust a little bit, and people get stuck with a few things there. So it's nice having those good sustainable jobs too. So sometimes that oil and gas industries can be a little cyclical there.
Yeah,
It's
I
nice
heard
seeing
South Dakota McDonald's. I'm sorry, South Dakota McDonald's was paying people like $20 an hour because they had to compete with the labor. So if you're working the drive-through, you're making 20 plus an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
I agree. I agree. So
Yep, definitely. So you enjoy providing guidance to sell side clients preparing an investment to attract the best offers. What is the single most important piece of advice you give a seller to maximize the value of their investment property before listing?
yeah, so I think that there are a few things that sometimes real estate investors or just owner occupiers, maybe they're not investors, per se. Like that wasn't the idea of it. They bought a warehouse because they needed a warehouse for their company. And now they're going to be selling that warehouse because they're selling the business, or they're downsizing, or they're relocating, or whatever. They prefer to lease, whatever. If they're going to do that, they're not in the real estate world per se. And so I show them comps, I show them what it has been selling in the last 6 months, or I might have to go out a little bit further depending on what zip code I'm in. But the important thing is to understand where your buyer's coming from. So they say, well, 6 months ago, this is what it sold for, and I say, okay, but in 6 months, what was the Fed rate? What was the 10-year at?
Yeah, yep,
Because people are borrowing based on these metrics. And
exactly.
so if the 10-year was at 4 and now it's at 5, or it was at 5 and now it's at 4, then that's the cost of capital has changed. And how much that has changed is an impact on a multi-million-dollar property. And so you need to be cognizant of that. And so I say that. And then I also try and say, what's your goal in the end of this? Do you just want to check for the sake of having a check? Or would you, like I've done deals with, owner financing where I say, okay, if you're negotiable on this, like let's say you own the property outright, if you get the check, you're going to pay capital gains on, on the gains that you've appreciated and you've now realized on the sale. Do you want to do that? Or maybe we can do something where they put a significant amount of money down, and then you're basically playing the bank's role, and you're getting almost like this annuity check every year for a few years. And especially in an environment like this, that gives you an advantage, because if we're on a interest rate down cycle, right, we're cutting the rates, and we'll see what happens. I don't think anyone believes that Jerome Powell's going to be staying on later this year. But so whoever we get in to replace it, if he continues to cut, because whatever the administration wants these rates cut, if we're going in a downward cycle, someone wants to close a deal and you're like, yeah, I'll hold the note for a year, that allows that buyer to now figure out where they're going to get the financing at the best rate. So they're paying today's, compressed valuation and getting tomorrow's rate. And so that's an appealing metric. So if you can offer that, and I'm not saying it is for everyone, obviously every client has their own needs, but if you can deal with that, that's a great way to move forward. And certainly I'm looking at, the short-term borrowing costs. I'll be doing some more flip projects this year. And, the short-term borrowing costs are much cheaper comparatively speaking. And so like that changes when you're buying a distressed asset. Obviously you have to concern yourself with that on the back end. When you sell it, you're going to be selling to someone who's borrowing at longer term debt.
Yep.
But it does mean that there's a spread on that.
Yeah. And that's great information, and really shows how important it is for sellers and buyers to work with someone like yourself that can walk them through that entire process and show them those little nuances that are really important, that'll really make a difference to the bottom line.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue to the next question. You actively help others get their start in investing. What is the biggest mistake you see new investors make, and how do you coach them to avoid it?
Yeah. So I think when people talk to me about real estate, they've seen that I've got like a proven concept. They get excited about it. That's fine. But I think you have to channel that energy. Real estate we're not trading Bitcoin here. So it's a long-term game. You have to be in it for the long term. You can't get emotionally involved in it. And that's impossible to do with a first-time buyer. But I just say to them, like, even if you get, like, I'll do coaching, but for the sales side, I do commercial, but I know the residential, that's how I got my start. And so when I speak to them, I say, listen, even if you get an accepted contract, like I'm not their realtor, I'm on the commercial side, but if they're doing residential, even if you get an accepted contract, do not start cracking champagne yet. Because that is like literally like step one in that direction. You still need to get an inspector in there. You still need to get it appraised and make sure that it measures up for the bank. Everything has to get in order with your financial. Like there's a lot going on. So just, and you don't need that whipsaw. That emotional whipsaw doesn't benefit you. The more that you can be agnostic to the transaction, the better off you'll be until the closing. Like the closing,
yeah. For investors, especially, it's different for first-time home buyers. There's more of an emotional component with that. But for investors, it needs to be a lot more about the bottom line and, what the numbers are telling you, rather than, that emotional component. You said everybody gets so excited to dive in, and, sometimes, that's not the best approach there for something like that, so it's
yeah. Unfortunately, the first-time investor is basically like the first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
There's still there's still that emotional, I want this to work. I want this to be part of the thing. And it's like, you know what? I bought a property this past summer in Phoenix, and I was looking at when I got approved for the financing, and it was over a year. I was shopping for like 14 or 15 months. I was under contract 4 times. I paid for 4 inspections that went nowhere. It's part of that grind. You have to be committed to it. You have got to be resilient, and just like, it's just part of the process. It stinks. No one wants to pay for an inspection that's not worth the paper it's printed on, but you have got to just understand that it's a cost of doing business. And the people that thrive in real estate investing understand that, and they don't get emotional about that. It's money that's part of it's a loss. It's a deduction. It's something for the CPA to take care of. It's not something we have to lose sleep over.
Yeah, the important word there is process, and it's like you said, it's just you got to be willing to take that, and like you might lose some money on a few deals, and just know that that's going to be part of it. And getting up and running, I'm sure the most difficult part. Once you get a few, it's a lot easier to see that through to the end.
100%.
So you were driven by the effort to learn new things, listing activities from scuba diving to listening to podcasts. How does that commitment to continuous learning inform your professional approach and keep you ahead of the curve in real estate?
Yeah, I mean, the world spins whether you want it to or not, and so I've been fortunate enough to have seen so much progression as a society. I mean, we could nitpick about like what's wrong with society, but you know, when I needed to do stuff for school, I had to get on my bike and go to the library.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't afford the encyclopedias. And like now I've lived through the advent of like the internet, and now we're on the AI stuff, and it's like the access to information is so easy
Yeah.
now. And sometimes that's not a great thing because if you work hard for it, you value it more. But the point in saying that is that it's really important to, if you want to stay current, if you want the competitive advantage, if you want the edge on your competition or on the other investor, you have got to make sure that you're sharpening your stone. Like, you
Yeah.
have to get your blade sharp. And that's the only way to do it. And there's no excuse not to right now. You have it accessible for nearly free. But that's not, I mean, yeah, maybe that helps you professionally, but I think, and like podcasts are super important, like yours, super important. What are other people talking about?
Yep. Exactly.
And then having a discerning mind where you can say, okay, this is valuable, this isn't, and that comes through experience. But also, like, what do you want to do this year? Like, we just started 2026. What do you want to do this year? Do you want to do a book a month? Do you want to learn? Do you want to take a wine course? Do you want to learn how to cook? What's going to be your recreational, step up this year? What are you doing this year to better yourself outside of work? It's like the worst thing you can do is like marry yourself to your work. You want to enjoy your work and you want to monetize your work, but there's got to be something. You can't be so one dimensional. Like, figure something out.
Exactly.
We're not here on this earth to just be grinding away every day. Like,
No doubt. No doubt.
that's not our purpose.
Yep. Yeah, some good stuff there again. Like, I know my wife always makes fun of me. I'm always trying to learn new stuff, and like a lot of times something will get in my head when I'm trying to sleep or something, and I just have to get up and like, okay, I need to learn a little bit about this to settle
Yeah.
my mind down.
Have you ever had something that in one area of your life where you picked up a talent or you learned something, and then in some other area you're like, wait a second, like this way to
This clicks
solve
here
it, or
too.
this
Yeah.
yeah, it was, and it carries over. I mean, the more of a Renaissance man you can be, like the better, and woman, like the more you can do that, the more expansive your mind is. It's like you're just a magnet to answers. You're a magnet to solutions, and
Yep.
that's awesome. Doesn't matter
Yeah,
if
and
you're
it really
doing great.
helps. And just being open to seeing how maybe different people have solved problems and stuff like that, and that can really trigger your mind to, oh hey, I can apply this to something else here too. So it's I think it's a unique way of thinking. And I always say to people now, like, if you don't have the information, it's because you're not willing to look for it, because information's out there on pretty much everything.
I know. I
You can
know.
get all the information you need, and you get overloaded at times, but
Yeah.
it's certainly out there, and it's easily accessible now for sure. So you were a fellow with the Leonine Forum. How does engaging with this type of intellectual community influence your strategic thinking regarding business and real estate?
Yeah. So I'm a practicing Catholic. Leonine Forum was named after Leo the Great, Pope Leo the 13th. We have a number of chapters around the country, and we're opening up more. There was 4 when I started in 2022. I think they're up to 6 now. Great group of good Catholics that have they've got clout in their workspace. They are true believers. They carry themselves accordingly. They live out the teachings through their civic and their professional careers. And yeah, I mean, I gotta say that they're an inspiration. So every year there's like a conference that they do, and the speakers are just amazing, just absolutely amazing. And it's obviously it's well, not obviously, but it's centered around the Catholic social teachings. But it really is amazing how it's so practical. It's not, I don't want to say it, but I don't want to talk about like another religion. They're not just like handing out Bibles saying like, oh, just, do this, do that. It's like, they're saying like, this is how you live a faith-filled life, right? So we all have our lives, right? But every part of our life is touched by Jesus. And so how does that impact you? And how are you going to take that forward? And so the Catholic social teachings are a great foundation to say, like, this is how we show more empathy at the workplace.
Gotcha.
It's not following a trend or checking a box or doing what's trending and, like what people want to hear, the PC thing to say or whatever. It's not about that. It's about how do we really help the individual? And so that's helped me overall become a better person. When I moved back from Arizona, I was hanging out with good people, but they weren't practicing Catholics. And I came to this realization: if I had a child tomorrow, who's going to be, if I couldn't use my family, right? Who's going to be the godmother and godfather? Who could I pick? And I had a limited pool. Great people, yeah, great people, but who could actually fit that role? Small pool.
Yeah,
And I was like, when I moved
yeah,
back to
that
New York,
sounds like a really great group, and I like that you mentioned the application of it. It's not just giving you information, but you can really see like practical application of being a member of that, and that's something that's really unique, and I can really see the value in that for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, looking ahead, what key trends or shifts do you anticipate in the investment real estate market, especially concerning the use of data analytics and technology for identifying undervalued assets?
Yeah, so machine learning, aka artificial intelligence, whatever everyone's calling it, is going to be a game changer. I mean, this year is going to be I've been following this very, very closely for the last couple of years, and I mean, underwriting is changing. I actually believe I was like dead set on office valuations like hitting a low this past year, and I still believe that they do, but I'm sitting the sidelines on doing an acquisition of one because what's going to happen to the labor market this year? We have no
Uh,
idea. I
we,
mean,
we really don't.
yeah, like some people are talking 30% layoffs in white collar jobs.
Yeah, yep.
I could, that doesn't seem that absurd. I just did an operating agreement that would have cost me thousands of dollars with a firm, and I did it in a matter of moments by subscribing to a $50 a month,
Yep.
dedicated legal, large language model, and so like that sort of thing is. There's going to be ramifications, and this year is where it's going to get rolled out. So what you saw last year was a lot of like, the companies, the enterprises are adopting this stuff. They're adopting the Microsoft and the chat and stuff like that. But you're going to see just people are using it more now to like draw pictures and make memes and stuff like that, which is silly stuff.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
super underutilized, but the fact that they're doing that means that they're using it. And if they're
yeah,
using it
exactly.
by the end of this year, it's going to be very different than what than what it was at this time last year. So yeah, I feel like that's going to change. That's going to be a game changer for underwriting. It's going to be a game changer for analyzing deals. I mean, if you're an analyst at one of these like CBREs or JLLs or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah, look out.
Yeah, I feel bad for you because that's a sweet gig. It's a sweet job coming out of college making that much money. And don't get me wrong, like you've been worth your weight in salt, but like it's going to be hard to do that now with the way that these large language models are processing data and like building Excel sheets in like 2 seconds flat.
Yeah,
I mean, as a human, you just cannot do it that fast. And,
absolutely.
and don't get me wrong, there's glitches, but these stacks build upon stacks. Every iteration of chats getting faster and better and smarter than the one before it. The fifth one was a massive leap from number 4. Jensen Huang from NVIDIA is talking about how their chips are building new chips. It's you know
Yeah.
this is going to be serious. And I'm sort of, to a fault, I'm sort of dismissive of the risks because I'm excited about the advantages, and I'm not a cybersecurity guy, so what do I know? But yeah, it's gonna be huge.
Man, like anything, if it gets the wrong people get a hold of it, it could do some bad things. But I always call it a force multiplier. Like I remember sitting down at my desk a couple months ago, and I was like, man, I got 3 hours to get all this work done, and like it's a hard deadline, and I have to get it done. And like started plugged in some AI stuff, and an hour and a half in, I was like, all right, what am I going to do for the next hour and a half? Because you just get stuff done so much faster with it, and it's remarkable how much more you can get done and focus on like high value stuff that you really need to do to move the needle forward rather than getting bogged down in a lot of the stuff that you don't want to be doing, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of give like a brief example. So I have this property in Arizona that butts up against another property on a perpendicular street. Our backyards basically meet, and then there's the corner house that kind of like is whatever, it's in that area. And so it went up for sale, and I was thinking about buying it because I was like, if I just tear down that fence, now I've got nearly a half an acre. And I was like, how much could I build? Because I've got a triplex on this one parcel. But if it's a half an acre joined, now maybe I could really push a lot of units onto the other new parcel. And it was a demo job anyway. The house is in a really distressed state. I mean, I was able to like look up zoning. I was able to draw like a CAD diagram of how these units would look. I was able to find out variances that were on the property. I mean, like, it was amazing that while I'm going to bed for like an hour, I'm just like clicking through this on my phone. It absolutely blew my mind that I could pull that off. And that was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we're getting faster very quickly. Yeah.
It learns how you like to do things, and it spits out better results each time you use it. It really is remarkable how the pace that it's moving at.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, this conversation's been incredibly insightful, showcasing your disciplined approach into investment, your analytical expertise, and your commitment to mission accomplishment. Your North Fork experience offers powerful lessons on achieving financial freedom through strategic action. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today.
My pleasure, Kirk. Thanks for having me on today.
Before we wrap up, for our listeners who are looking for a highly analytical realtor and investor to help them find undervalued products or projects or maximize their portfolio returns, what's the best way for them to reach out to you or learn more about your services?
Yeah, for coaching or jumping in on one of our investments, you could hit me up at kevinm@sfsiaz.com. And then if you have a property in the state of New York that you're looking to buy, sell, or lease, you can hit me up at kevin-murphy@kwgo.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we include those details in our show notes for easy access. Thanks. That's all for this episode of the North Fork Experience. A huge thank you again to our incredible guest, Kevin Murphy, and thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep experiencing all that our communities have to offer. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk.